Flag.
Woo!
Well, there's no guarantees on that, but got a few jokes, and some of them might even be funny. All right, let's. I didn't quite get the word about the food theme, so most of my jokes are more the general type of jokes. But
yeah, just do whatever, no problem.
The thought I did have, food related, was take a jar of mayonnaise and clean it out, fill it back up with vanilla yogurt, and then go sit somewhere in public and eat it. Because that would just blow people's minds. All right.
Mayonnaise.
All right. A mafia gang takes on a deaf man to run their deliveries, feeling it would be safer to have someone unable to overhear conversations. However, one day when he is to deliver a large sum of money, he never shows up with it. The mobsters track him down but don't find the money on him. As none of them are able to use sign language, they bring in an interpreter. The mobster asks him, "Where did you hide the money?" The interpreter signs the question to the man. The bagman signs his reply. The interpreter says, "He had to ditch it in the river because the cops were on to him." The mobster says, "I'm not fooling around. You better tell me where that money is." The interpreter signs that again. The bagman signs his reply, and the interpreter relays, he swears he's telling the truth. He had to get rid of it. The mobster pulls out a revolver and points it between the deaf man's eyes. "Tell me where that money is, or I'll kill you right now." And the interpreter signs his statement. The bagman, sweating profusely, signs, "It's inside a shoebox under a loose floorboard in my bedroom closet." The interpreter says, he doesn't know where it is, and he doesn't think you have the guts to pull the trigger. All right. Question. How many lindens does it take to change a light bulb? The answer? 69% of our development team is currently working on this problem. Please be patient. Check the blog for updates. In the meantime, here's Torley Linden with 10 super fun things to do in the dark.
Oh.
A blonde and her husband were watching the evening news together. The newsreader said, "In international news, a disaster near Rio de Janeiro today. 5 Brazilian men died in a skydiving accident." The blonde burst into tears, and her husband couldn't comfort her. They were participating in a risky sport, and they knew the dangers, he said. Through her tears, the blonde woman said, "But that's just so terrible. How many is a Brazilian?"
Oh.
Three women were in a bar talking about their husbands and how they made love. The first woman said, "My husband is a marriage counselor, and before we make love, he brings me flowers and candy. I like that." The second woman proclaimed, "My husband is a mechanic. He makes love a little rough, but I like that." The third woman replied, "Well, my husband works for Linden Labs, and all he does is sit on the edge of the bed and tell me how good it's going to be when I finally get it."
Oh, that's a great one.
2 men were out hunting, and they bagged a beautiful 16-point buck. As they were dragging it back to the car by the antlers, they were having a terrible time of it, with the antlers constantly getting stuck in the brush and the undergrowth. Another hunter happened upon them and says, "You fellows might want to try dragging that deer by the hooves. It would be a lot easier." And the hunter, and he goes on his way. After a little while, one of the hunter turns to the other and says, "That guy was right. It is much easier dragging this deer by the hooves." Second hunter replies, "Yeah, but we're getting further and further away from the car."
Oh, well, I got it.
3 guys go to a ski lodge and there aren't enough rooms, so they have to share a bed. In the middle of the night, the guy on the right wakes up and says, "I had this wild, vivid dream of getting a hand job." The guy on the left wakes up, and unbelievably, he's had the same dream too. And the guy in the middle wakes up and says, "That's funny. I dreamed I was skiing."
Oh.
An employee calls his boss up and says, "I can't come to work today. I'm sick." The boss says, "When I'm sick, I make love to my wife. Try that." 2 hours later, the employee calls the boss and says, "You're right, boss. I feel much better. By the way, you've got a great house." Why doesn't Smokey the Gorian bear have any children? Because every time she gets hot, he beats her with a shovel.
Oh.
Wife wakes up in the middle of the night around 4 a.m. Her husband is missing from the bed, but she sees a light coming on from the hallway. She walks into the kitchen and finds him sitting at the table with an open beer that he hasn't been drunk. She says, "Honey, what's up?" The husband turns and looks at her and says, "You remember when we were having sex in my car and your father caught us and said, 'Son, I'm the chief of police and you better marry my daughter or I'll have you locked up for 20 years. The wife lovingly replies, "Of course I remember." The husband says, "Well, I would have gotten out today."
Thinker would love that one.
Two Lindens walk into a bar. One goes and sits at the bar, and the other walks straight across the room and crashes headlong into the wall, where he stands silently, face against the wall. The other Linden looks at the bartender and says, "Don't mind him, he's just lagging."
Cute.
This guy sticks his head into a barber shop and asks, "How long before I can get a haircut?" The barber looks around the shop and says, "About 2 hours," and the guy leaves. A few days later, the same guy sticks his head in the door and asks, "How long before I can get a haircut?" The barber looks around the shop full of customers and says, "About 2 hours," and the guy leaves again. A week later, the same guy sticks his head in the door and asks, "How long before I can get a haircut?" The barber looks around the shop and says, "About an hour and a half," and the man once again leaves. The barber looks over at his friend in the shop and says, "Hey, Bill, follow that guy and see where he goes." In a little while, Bill comes back into the shop laughing hysterically. The barber asks, "Bill, where did he go when he left here?" Bill looks up and says, "To your house." Two hikers were out in the woods camping, and in the middle of the night, a rattlesnake crawls into one of the man's sleeping bag and bites him right on the end of his member. The second hiker says, "Hang on, I'll get help." He runs all the way down the hill to a payphone. He calls the hospital and tells the doctor, "My friend was just bitten by a rattlesnake. What should I do?" The doctor tells him, "You have to take a firm grip on the area, make 2 X-shaped cuts, and suck the poison out." The man runs back up the hill to where his friend is lying. First hiker says, "What did the doctor say?" Second hiker says, "The doctor says you're going to die." That's all I got, folks. Thanks for laughing.
Yay! That was great.
Very nice.
Good job. Good job.
Yay! Fantastic.
Thank
Woo-woo!
you, Hector.